It's not too misleading to think of this whole class as being about the mind-body problem. That is, the question of the relationship between minds and bodies, or more generally, the question of the nature of minds. In the early weeks, we explored some classical and modern proposals about the nature of minds, and we identified two challenges for any successful theory. One, the problem of mental causation. How can minds and bodies interact? Two, the problem of other minds. How can we know about minds, including both our own and those other than our own? At this point, we're halfway through the class and we've seen three theories about what minds are: dualism, eliminativism, and behaviorism. And we started to evaluate these theories according to some desiderata that we identified: realism, causal efficacy, generality, and explanatory power. We're going to come back to that scorecard, but right now I want to draw your attention to two features of the differing approaches to minds that we haven't highlighted up to this point. First, notice that different theorists have emphasized different parts of our mental lives in their theories. For Nagel and Descartes, the principal phenomenon that requires our explanation is our conscious awareness of ourselves. The existence of a subjective point of view, as Nagel puts it, or the fact that there's something that it's like to be us. That is, something that it's like for us to be us. Nagel and Descartes have different ideas about what goes into the awareness of one's own consciousness. Nagel includes sensations and Descartes does not, but both agree that some things are conscious, there's something that it's like to be them, and some things do not have consciousness. It's the very existence of a so-called subjective point of view that's at the core of the mind-body problem for these philosophers. Call this team consciousness. In contrast, Kathleen Akins, Gilbert Ryle, Alan Turing, and Daniel Dennett don't start from a subjective point of view from which we're supposed to have direct acquaintance with our own consciousness, but not that of others. Instead, they start from the point of view in which we're attempting, from the outside as it were, to explain and predict the actions of ourselves and others. And we do that by identifying the causes or reasons for action. For these theorists, the core problem of the mind-body problem is the existence of things that have capacities for mental states like beliefs and desires, states with meaning or content. The idea is that beliefs and desires don't just cause behavior, but they also make some behaviors reasonable or rational. We all know that some things are rational and some things are not. Some things are capable of having reasons and some things are not. You and I are rational. This can of beets is not. For some theorists, this distinction about rationality is the one that's at the core of the mind-body problem. Call this team rationality. So one point of disagreement among theorists is over whether the most basic mental phenomenon that we need to explain have to do with consciousness or with rationality. And of course, it's not just one or the other, but all sorts of mixtures of the two. A second point of disagreement, which of course interacts with the first, concerns how tightly connected minds and bodies must be, or what kinds of constraints mental life puts on bodies. Here, the extreme positions are easy to identify. On one extreme, the substance dualist holds that minds and bodies are completely distinct, so they can be entirely separated from one another. Having a mind doesn't require having any particular kind of body or any particular kind of bodily features, because we can have minds without any bodies at all. At the other extreme would be a view that holds that having a mind like ours requires having a body exactly like ours in every detail, not including just the brain, but also the limbs and so on. The most extreme version of this theory might add that there are no kinds of minds other than ours, so having any kind of mind requires having a body exactly like ours in every way. So the second point of disagreement focuses on the extent to which minds and bodies can vary independently of one another. Answers to this question can be, at least provisionally, located along a continuum, from those who think that there's no necessary connection between minds and bodies at all, such as substance dualists, and those who think that minds and bodies can't vary from each other much at all, such as some of the mind-brain identity theorists that we'll soon meet. Behaviorists, for example, can be thought of as proposing that you at least need a body that is capable of certain behaviors in order to count as having mental states, but you don't need to be exactly like a human being or have a brain exactly like a human brain. Although we'll need to be more precise as we go forward, it's not too misleading to think of contemporary debates over the mind-body problem as centering over the question of how much variation strikes the right balance between too much and too little. As you pay attention to how different theorists think we should strike the balance between too much and too little variation, also keep in mind whether they're emphasizing mental phenomena having to do with consciousness or with rationality. Sometimes that affects how many things they think have minds, depending on whether the question is how many things have conscious sensations or how many things are rational. Okay, now back to brains.